Hello to all part of the true crime community and or all who just wish to be entertained. It's Jay again, and I am back with another unsolved true crime case today. We are on case number 9 now, and this one is definitely a different one from the past cases I have done. It's very interesting, or at least I think it is. Some of the theories about this case may not entertain everyone, but still, at the very least, this case is interesting and unusual. As always, I will now put up my disclaimer. For this video, we will be discussing the death of a man, and I will give pretty graphic detailed descriptions on his injuries and how he was found. So if you do not wish to hear about that right now, not a problem, of course. Click out of the video, take care of your mental health, and hopefully I'll see you come back in a later video. But let's go ahead and get into this case. This is the bizarre death of Zigmund Adamski. Zigmund Jan Adamski, who was known to his friends and family as Ziggy, was born on August 17th, 1923 in Poland, and seemed to have lived a relatively normal childhood in Poland. But like a lot of people during this time, Zigmund and his family were forced to flee Poland during the high point of World War II. He eventually ended up relocating in the small village Tingley in the United Kingdom, which is located about 41 miles away from Manchester. He quickly found a job as a coal miner and spent many years doing work as a miner. He married his wife Lottie in 1951, and by all accounts, they lived a very simple, normal life together. Zigmund was a shy man who kept to himself, but was very kind and friendly to anyone that started a conversation with him. The couple were known in the small little village of Tingley to be both very quiet, and they generally got along with most people, but they also did mostly keep to themselves. But sadly, Lottie, his wife, was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and after suffering for a few years with this illness, she became confined to a wheelchair. And of course, because of her illness, Zigmund wanted to be home more often for her, to take care of her. They were getting older now, but Zigmund was there for his wife as much as he possibly could. Zigmund, who was now in his mid-50s in the late 1970s, was also beginning to suffer from health issues himself. He had developed a lung deformity that made it extremely difficult for him to breathe. This was presumably developed due to his years working as a coal miner with his constant exposure to coal dust. He wasn't working as often anymore, and he really wasn't able to because of these health issues. And he even requested and applied for early retirement because of his issues. I did discover that this request for early retirement was originally denied. Zigmund Adamski did request an appeal to this decision, but unfortunately, the letter that granted his early retirement came in the mail one day after Zigmund had disappeared, and Zigmund never got to open up this letter. It was Friday, June 6th, 1980. Zigmund was now 56 years old, and it was another normal day for him and his wife Lottie. They were both excited and looking forward to the next day on June 7th, as they were both going to attend a family member's wedding. It was about 3:30 p.m. when Zigmund left his home to pick up some groceries at a local market that was located near his home. There would be a few witnesses that saw Zigmund walking on his way to this market. They would describe him as being cheerful and in a good mood as he was walking. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But as hours started to pass and Zigmund still didn't come home from the market, Lottie started becoming concerned. The market Zigmund said he was going to was just a short few blocks away from the road and should not have taken him long at all for him to make this round trip. More hours passed, and Lottie was now frantic. This was extremely not like Zigmund to take this long, and as far as she was told by Zigmund himself, he wasn't going anywhere else except this market. So Lottie then decided to call the police and reported her husband, Zigmund Adamski, missing the evening of June 6th. The police, of course, first visited the market to confirm if Zigmund had made it there that day, and they were informed by one of the clerks that was working that day that Zigmund did come into the market and he did buy his groceries. This clerk also described Zigmund as being in a cheerful mood. The police attempted to follow his tracks after he left the market, but no one else had talked to Zigmund after he left. They searched the surrounding area, but Zigmund Adamski was nowhere to be found. It was as if he just evaporated into thin air. Initially, the police, I feel like, didn't seem to be that concerned about Zigmund, as it had only been a few hours since he had been last seen, and they figured that he would just come back on his own, as there were no indicators that he had been in any type of trouble. But his wife Lottie was immediately concerned with the entire situation, and her initial belief was that he could have been kidnapped because him disappearing like this was completely out of his character. As a few days went by, there was still no sign of Zigmund. There were no leads, no clues to where he could have gone. Lottie knew something was wrong. Her husband Zigmund would never just leave her alone for days. She knew something had happened to him. Then the search for Zigmund Adamski came to an abrupt and sad end 5 days after he disappeared on June 11th, 1980. In the town of Todmorden, which is about 20 miles away from Tingley, a man named Trevor Parker started his usual rounds working at his father's coal yard, which was called Tomlin's Coal Yard. As he was walking his rounds at around 3:45 p.m., he saw something strange on top of one of the tall coal piles. At first, he didn't know what it was, so he got closer. When he was close enough, he saw a disturbing scene on top of this pile of coal. It was a man's body. Trevor instantly contacted the police and told them about this dead body. Trevor had worked early that same morning between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m., and the body was not on top of the coal pile during this time in the morning. So it seemed that the body had been dumped on top of this coal pile sometime between 11 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. Investigator Alan Godfrey and a colleague of his responded to the call. They came to the coal yard at approximately 4:10 p.m., and immediately they were confronted with very strange things about the scene. Things that just didn't make a lot of sense. Firstly, Zigmund's body was clean from any coal dust. It's as if he were placed on top of this 12-foot pile of coal. He couldn't have climbed up this pile of coal without getting at least some type of black coal dust on himself or his clothes, especially since it had been rainy in the area of Todmorden the past couple of days. If he had climbed all the way top of this pile, there should have been coal dust on him somewhere. What was also weird was he was still wearing the suit he had left in the day he had disappeared to the market, but his shirt that he had been wearing was missing. His wallet and watch were also missing, and none of these items were ever found. In some reports, it's stated that it looks as if someone had attempted to quickly redress him because the suit jacket itself was misbuttoned, his shoes were not tied properly, and his pants weren't fastened all the way. Upon further examination, it was noticed that his hair was cut shorter in a crew-like fashion, but wasn't very neatly cut. It seemed as if whoever had cut his hair wasn't a professional. But what was probably most strange was that when they were looking for injuries to his body, they found several small burn marks on the back of his head, his neck, and his shoulders. All of these burn marks were similar in size, about 1 to 2 inches wide, and on these burn marks, there was actually an unidentified yellow gel-like ointment. And disturbingly, his eyes were wide open, his mouth was slightly open, and Alan Godfrey remarked that he looked as if he was absolutely terrified during his last few moments before he passed. His body was examined by Coroner James Turnbull, who has stated that Zigmund Adamski's case is the biggest mystery of his entire career. James was beyond baffled when he examined Zigmund's body. He was not able to give much answers at all. He couldn't tell where Zigmund had been before he was at the coal yard. He couldn't identify what caused these several burn marks on his body. The yellowish ointment on the burn marks was tested but couldn't be identified by forensic scientists either. So they had no idea what this ointment was, or even if it was an ointment, they had no idea what the substance was. They did dive into the possibility that Zigmund had been treated at a hospital somewhere, but they never found any record of him being at or treated at any of the hospitals. It was noted that Zigmund had no signs being starved. He seemed to have fed well and slept well, and he had no other injuries besides these burn marks. What also baffled the coroner was that he noticed that his beard only had 1 day of growth, and he had been missing for 5 whole days. It was determined that Zigmund had died the same day he was found. They believed he had died somewhere between 11 a.m. and 1:15 p.m., which was just a couple of hours before Trevor Parker had found his body. But at the end of the examination, James Turnbull ruled that Zigmund Adamski had died from a heart attack, which I guess this could potentially explain why he looked so terrified as he passed. Investigators, of course, explored the possibility that Ziggman had been murdered and the coal yard had been the dump site of his body, but they had no evidence to go off on with this, especially since his death had been ruled as a heart attack by this point. It took about a week for them to figure out that this was Zigmund Adamski's body, and as you can imagine, Lottie was heartbroken when they came to her door. And like everyone else, she was confused by the entire situation. Everyone wanted to know what happened to Zigmund. So let's dive into the theories of this case. The most popular theory is the potential that Zigmund Adamski had been abducted and experimented on by aliens. And I get it. This can be deemed as a very outlandish theory. Not everyone is open to this possibility, but when you think about it, it honestly could make a lot of sense due to how many unanswered questions there are related to the state of Zigmund's body. No one could understand how he could have gotten on top of this 12-foot coal pile. But a lot of people seem to think that the answer is quite simple, that he had been placed on top of the coal pile, airborne, instead of himself or somebody carrying his body up the pile, which it makes sense. The pile seemed to have been undisturbed upon the discovery of his body, and the fact that he had no coal dust on him whatsoever seems like he had to have been placed on the coal pile in some way. And it would be impossible for this coal pile to be undisturbed if he or someone else climbed on top of it. The town of Todmorden is known to be a frequent UFO sighting hotspot. Throughout the years, several sightings of UFOs have been reported before and after Zigmund Adamski's case takes place. Many people, especially in the area, believe what happened was that Ziggman was walking home with his groceries, and it was on his way home he was abducted by extraterrestrials. This could explain how he just seemed to have vanished without a trace. This could also explain how no one was able to provide an answer for where he was during those 5 days. A lot of people believe he had been experimented on, and the evidence for this is the burn marks. Pathologists could not determine what made these burn marks, or the yellowish substance that was found on these burns. So hypothetically, what if aliens were experimenting on Zigman? They put him in a state of unconsciousness, made these burn marks on him, and did whatever other experiments that they do. And they put on this substance they've created themselves on these marks to heal him. Then what if at some point Zigmund had woken up during these experiments and he saw these aliens and maybe the sight of them was just too much for him? He already had some medical issues. He was in his mid-50s. It doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility that the sight and realization that he's been kidnapped by aliens could trigger a heart attack. I know if I were abducted by aliens, it would scare the absolute hell out of me. If I woke up and I was surrounded by aliens, I know for a fact that I would at least have a panic attack and probably lose control of my bladder. And this is an older man we're talking about. Many people on this planet have been scared to the point of a heart attack. So I definitely think it was possible for him to be scared into a heart attack. So maybe that's what happened. He saw these aliens and this triggered a heart attack that ultimately ended up killing him. And then after he was gone, the aliens just decided to dump his body off. A lot of people truly think this is what happened to Zigmund. Of course, there are variations of the alien abduction theory. Some seem to think that it wasn't an accidental death, that these aliens intentionally abducted and killed him and then dumped his body. I also read a couple of theories I found that maybe Zigmund woke up during their experimentations and he tried to fight off the aliens to get away from them, and they ended up killing him in some sort of a self-defense. There are a lot of possible scenarios that could have happened with this theory. But what I think is surprising is Alan Godfrey, the investigator of Zigmund's case, seemingly is also open to this idea that Zigmund could have been abducted by aliens. Because according to Alan, allegedly he had a brief experience and witnessed a UFO himself about 6 months after Zigmund's body had been found. It was the evening of November 28th, 1980. Alan was responding to a report of cattle wandering around a local estate in Todmorden. He was driving down the road when he claims he saw a bright light hovering above the road. And as he got closer, he saw what he describes as a diamond-shaped rotating object. He states that it was about 14 feet high, 20 feet wide, and it was hovering 5 feet off the ground. When he saw this object, he immediately tried to reach his radio to call for help, but it wasn't working. At this point, Alan had stopped his car and was just staring at this object that was in the middle of the road. He then decided to try to take out his sketch pad and pen to attempt to draw it. And then all of a sudden, in an instant, the object vanished. Alan claims he was about 30 yards further down the road than he had been, and he was driving his patrol car again. And when he looked down at the clock, he realized that he had experienced missing time, as it was 25 minutes later. He had no memory for that missing time. He doesn't know how the object moved away from the road. He doesn't know at what point he began to drive his patrol car again. It was completely blank for him for 25 full minutes. And if this did happen to him, that's terrifying. After this experience, Alan did retire from the police force within a couple of weeks after this happened. Word had gotten out that he had this alien experience, and he apparently didn't want his kids to be ridiculed. He said it was hard enough for them having a police dad, but a police dad who believed in aliens would have been much worse for them. So he did retire, and he became a speaker at charity fundraising events. Alan did actually end up writing a book on his alien experience, which is called Who or What Were They? He claims he can't rule out the possibility that Zigman was abducted, and says that he is very open-minded to the possibility as well, which I think that's very interesting, since most investigators, of course, completely shut down those types of ideas. There are video interviews available of Alan describing his experience, and I will link that down below if anyone wants to watch his interview. I think it's incredibly interesting, so I do recommend watching it if you are into that type of content, of course. It's been 42 years since Zigman's body has been found, and aliens aren't the only theories that surround this case. Another theory that could have possibly happened to Zigman is that he could have been struck by lightning. And this could make a lot of sense. It could potentially explain how he got those burn marks, and this could be the reason why his heart stopped. But the problem with this theory is it still doesn't explain how or why Zigman was on top of this coal pile, or why this yellowish ointment appeared on his burn marks, or even why his shirt, wallet, and watch were missing and never recovered. If he did get struck by lightning, then I guess when I think about it, someone could have just robbed him for those 3 items. We all know there are shitty people in the world, so I don't think that that's so far-fetched. Another possible theory I read was that in 2005, Zigmund's family had been interviewed in an attempt to gain answers to Zigmund Adamski's mystery, and it was revealed that Zigmund and Lottie were a part of a family feud that had been going on at the time. Zigmund and Lottie had allowed a female family member to stay with them after she had filed a restraining order against her estranged husband. Because of this incident, some of Zigmund's family members alleged that this husband may have been the one who kidnapped Zigmund in a fit of rage, and was the one who held him captive for those 5 days. And they think that maybe the stress of him being kidnapped led him to have a fatal heart attack. And then this man, of course, then dumped his body on top of the coal pile. And of course, there's always the potential that it could have been a stranger that took Zigmund. Of course, it doesn't have to be this alleged estranged husband. It could have been anyone. But with this theory, again, there are holes. If this were the case, how did Zigmund get those burn marks? And what were these burn marks even from? That's what bothers me about this whole thing. That, and of course, how the hell his body got on top of the coal pile. Those 2 things about this case make it extremely difficult for anyone to provide solid theories that explains everything. Zigmund Adamski's case is very unique, to say the least. I think it's odd that his cause of death was determined to be a heart attack so quickly. I feel like they didn't dive into the possibility that this could have been a kidnapping or murder. In my opinion, from how his body was found and the circumstances that his clothes weren't put on correctly, these burn marks being on his body, his head being shaven, his wallet and watch and shirt never being found, this case should have been labeled as an undetermined death at the very least. Again, in my opinion. Zigmund's case is incredibly odd. There are way too many holes in all of the theories that are out there. Most people accept the idea he had simply passed away from a heart attack, but under the circumstances, maybe it could have been something more. I myself can't rule out any of the possibilities. It bothers me that there aren't really answers or concrete proof of what happened to Zigmund. Him missing for 5 days, I want to know what he was doing during those days he was unaccounted for. Where he went, if he was with anyone. He was somewhere. He had been fed. He apparently had the ability to shave his beard and get a haircut. It's frustrating not having any real answers. And I'm sure it's frustrating for his family too. If you know me, you know I never give up on finding answers for any unsolved case. I don't care how long it's been or the circumstances of the case, cases can be solved. And Zigmund Adamski's case is no different. His case can be solved. And whether he was murdered or if this was some sort of an accident or even alien abduction, I hope one day all the questions can be answered. But that is it for me today on this case. Thank you for sticking around even though it's not the normal type of case I do. Please comment down below. I'd love to see everyone's thoughts. Or if you have your own theories on what happened to Zigmund Adamski, I'd love to see them too. Like, share, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next case. Bye, guys.